Thank you all for coming tonight. Welcome to our Lent study, the first session here. Michael and I, we had some stuff we had been talking about doing, and then Michael was actually reading through a book on the Enneagram, which reminded me that I had done that a few years ago and kind of had some recollection of it. And we got to visiting about it, and the short version is we decided we would try it for this thing. And so as we go through this, please ask questions. This will be fairly informal. Tonight's session will be a little different. About half of it will be information, and then the second half will be kind of interactive. Our hope is that you leave here tonight with some understanding of what the Enneagram is, and to some extent how it works, and what that means for you. And then you can go from there to the next podcast or to future sessions, or you can dig around on the internet. As always, be a little careful with the internet for some reasons we'll cover tonight. But we start really with the question, what is personality? If I asked you to define personality, what do you say? The kind of person you are. In what sense, Lynn?
Well, emotionally, mentally.
Okay. Emotionally, mentally, physically, possibly. Sure. What else? What does personality mean?
How you appear to other people.
Okay.
Or interact with other people.
How you interact with other people. Okay. The working definition is the combination of characteristics and traits that form an individual's distinctive character. And probably the key words there are combination and distinctive. So personality is essentially the way that you're wired. And next week we'll have a little more conversation, probably via podcast, on the whole nature-nurture thing. Are you born a way, or are you made a way, or is it a combination of both, which it is. One of the surprises for me when our children were born is that I anticipated we brought these sort of blank slates, empty vessels home, and then we filled them with our stuff. And I remember just being astounded at how much of who they are came home from the hospital with them. Do they get afraid? Are they stubborn? Are they quiet? Are they not quiet? And before we had a chance to really mess them up, they had some of those things seemingly hardwired into their brains and their personalities. So a few questions here as we think about personality. And when we talk personality, especially in the way of an inventory or an assessment, we're really talking about some of the common traits. Some of the different things that people have that some of us have in common and some of us don't. Whether that's a tendency, whether that's an assumption, or a practice among individuals. So just a few questions here. Is it better to act or be right? Is it better to get something done or wait until you know what the right thing is? If you face a crisis, is your first instinct to back away, to sit and think, or to jump into it? If you have a choice, would you be around people or no people? People, raise your hand. No people. Okay, there we go. Okay, do you ever feel like it is your job somehow to make other people happy? Oh yeah, look, all the ladies. Yes, good. Is it more important to be true to who you understand yourself to be, or to make a good impression on others? True. True to yourself. Okay? Is a perfect day doing something or doing nothing? How many somethings? How many nothings? A couple of nothings.
We have a half and half.
Half and half? Okay. Would you rather be in charge or be told what to do? Do you find music or facts more interesting? And when you go to a restaurant that you've been to before and had something that you like, do you order it again or do you try something different? So there aren't right and wrong answers to these questions, though we assume that our answer is the right one, right? So whatever we tend to do, we think of as normative. Nobody is just like you, but others are like you in some ways, and this is how we can talk about personality groups as chunks of these similarities that we can put together and say, these people of this type tend to hold on to these traits, these tendencies. For instance, introverts, extroverts, that kind of thing. And they tend to be trait-based. Most personality inventories try to find out things about what you do and what you like. So are you an extrovert? Are you organized or are you good with chaos? Are you a list person? Are you not a list person? Are you rational? Are you emotional? And we tend to group people by their identification of the way that these traits impact them. The Enneagram comes from a different place. The Enneagram, Enna means 9, and grammos means to be written. And so the Enneagram is really named for this 9-pointed figure, this sort of 9-pointed star, you might say. And the idea is that there are these sort of basic forces that shape people and cosmos. And this was a mystical thing. There's lots of conversation about where the Enneagram comes from. Is it a mystic Islam thing? Is it a Christian thing? Is it a pagan thing? But somewhere along the way, it caught on. In the early 1900s, it was popularized that there were 9 basic forces that shaped human life. Then in the mid-1900s, a man named Oscar Ichazo says that it can be used to identify personalities. And he is the first one, he gets credit for the idea that you could group people somewhere along this circle in one of those 9 types. And then in the 1970s, this gets picked up by some Jesuit priests, and they pioneer the idea that you could really use this inventory to help with spirituality and spiritual practice. So the Enneagram is not exactly a personality tool because in some ways it predates the psychological concept of personality. It tends to be a little more spiritual. It tends to be based a little bit more in our spirituality rather than our specific traits. So the Enneagram isn't going to really talk to us too much about whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, whether you're organized. That may spill into it, but that's not where it starts. It's going to start with, why are you the way that you are? What is your core fear? What is the thing you're most afraid of? What is the thing that you most need? What is the basic need that you pursue daily or as a human being? What are your childhood experiences? What were the messages you received, and especially the ones that may have been negative, or where you lacked, maybe where you felt like you felt short? And how does that affect you? And part of the idea, I was just talking with Greg a minute ago, part of the idea is that our personality is in some way a form of self-protection. It's the thing we developed to protect ourselves from whatever threats we perceived. And so it is our strengths and weaknesses, but it's really how they manifest themselves in healthy and unhealthy ways. One of the things I very much like about the Enneagram is that what it tells you about yourself is essentially neutral. It says, okay, Clint, I think you fit in this type. This type of people, they tend to do these things. They tend to fear these things. They tend to interact and react in these ways. And at your best, you can really do this in a good way. At your worst, you probably do this in a bad way. And the idea is that our strengths are often our weaknesses too. That the things we rely on, if I'm really good at something, I will tend to overuse that. And I'll tend not to develop other gifts because I learn to trust the ones that I may have. So, the origins of the Enneagram are not Christian, but many have found it helpful and helpful to discover some truth about ourselves. Now, you may already know some of this. You may have some traits. You may know even a little bit about them, but I think some of us will be surprised when we encounter the Enneagram's ideas about what might be behind some of our personality. And I will tell you that many people have the experience of not feeling like the Enneagram is patting them on the back and saying, hey, great job. More like the Enneagram is a mirror that looks through what we'd like it to see and tells us some things that we'd rather not hear, even if we already know about them. In fact, I would say, Michael and I have laughed that if you're not willing probably to take a somewhat honest look at yourself, come and eat soup, and then we need help in the nursery. So you've got an out if you need it. There will be moments, and we will try not to facilitate them, but I think the Enneagram by nature, you will have moments where you may feel a little uncomfortable with it. We're not going to ask you to spill that for everybody. We're not going to, this isn't therapy. This is just a discussion, but I think you will find, as almost everybody has that does it, is it will tell you some things and you'll go, oh yeah, that sounds right. But I'm not happy about it, but it sounds right. Let me stop there. Comments, questions? Michael, anything to add? One of the rules of thumb is you haven't found your number till one of them's kicked you in the gut. We'll see if maybe that won't be true for you. Okay. A little about the basics then. You see here the basic design of the Enneagram. You can get really in the weeds. There are people that draw circles, and you're going to hear as we go through this some conversation about wings and lines to and lines away. This is very graphical, and we are just touching the outer surface of it tonight. So if you get online and look at Enneagram stuff, be prepared. It may get very deep in ways that you probably don't need. So there are 9 types. Again, if you get online, you will notice that many Enneagram presentations have a label for each type. They give each type a name. Some of the folks we've been reading say that they are hesitant to do that because once you have a name, you have a bias. Once there's a label on something, you think, oh, that sounds great, I'm that, or oh, I don't want to be that. And the idea is that the numbers give you the best chance to approach the type without a lot of bias and prior assumptions. So the other thing that is true about the Enneagram is you can get online. We're going to do some basic, simple tests tonight to try and help you find a number. You can get online. There are Enneagram assessments. You can take them. Again, the people who are hardcore Enneagram teachers tend to suggest that our best way of finding our number is to live with them long enough that one of them begins to feel true. And rather than have a test tell us what we are, that we are better when we discover it through self-discovery, through self-examination. Now, we need to speed that along, so we're going to help you point in the direction of a number. But if you go check out that number, be a little cautious of some of the tests and evaluations, though they're fine. But a better way maybe is to spend some time reading about your type or your possible type and just seeing if it fits, if it resonates. The arrangement is a circle. So the idea of the Enneagram is that there's a wholeness. The Christian teachers of the Enneagram teach that Jesus would be in the middle, that Jesus would be the perfect balance of all 9 types, and would be the positive or the healthy version of all 9 types at once. And so, in part, the Enneagram teaches not that you should, if you're a 6, be a great 6, that you should learn to try and integrate in some way, even out of your 6, and learn things that other types have to offer. I don't know if that makes sense yet. If it doesn't, don't worry about it too much. It will as we go through this. Also, you will notice that as for any given number, there's a number on either side of it. So the 9 has what is called a wing of 8 and 1. And you are almost definitely going to find that you're not a pure thing. You're a 5, but a 4 sounds pretty good too. So the typical idea is you have one core type, and then on one of the numbers that touches that type, you have a wing, and you embrace some of that personality as well. So if you find yourself between 2 numbers, don't be surprised by that. And the question for you will be, which one feels most true to me? Some Enneagram people say that you should think of yourself in your early 20s. That's when psychologists suggest we are most who we are, which is not good news for most of us. Let's just be honest. But if you can think of yourself as younger, would I have backed down or attacked when I was 20? Now that I'm older, hopefully I'm more balanced. But what would I have done before I got balanced? Sometimes that can help you move the needle and say, oh yeah, I'm a that. I'm probably that. You will generally have one type the strongest, though you might find some personal truth in several of them. And you will probably find that you have a wing. We'll deal more with wings later as we go through this. I think for now it's just enough to be aware of it. Let me stop again. Comments, questions, thoughts?
What if you can't remember when you were 20?
That's okay. Think of what you would have liked to have been. Also, well, let me say, any other comments, questions? Okay, a couple of things. The Enneagram offers us an opportunity to be honest. One of the hardest things about personality assessment is that we have to try and answer how we really are instead of how we wish we are or how we think we are. Having said that, it is better if you answer this yourself and then maybe ask your spouse or your family, does that make sense? Don't let them put you in the type. Try to type yourself, but then maybe bounce it off them and say, ooh, that sounded like me. Does that sound like me to you? Secondly, this is really important. At some point, you're going to learn just enough about the Enneagram to use it as a club. At the very least, an accusation against other people who do something and you say, you're a 3 and you act like a 3 and I don't get along with 3s. There's not better or worse. There's no number that's better than any other number. They're all different. And the idea isn't so you have a way to categorize and box other people. The idea is that so we have a chance to understand ourselves. However, once you start on this Enneagram, you will find yourself talking to people going, oh man, she sounds like a 4. I don't know what to do with 4s. That will probably happen. Keep that at the fun level. Just if you want to do that, just kind of keep that lighthearted. So with some self-awareness and with humility, we are going to move now into the second part, and Michael is going to walk us through some exercises that will give you an opportunity to be pointed toward a number, and once you have that number, we'll talk about what it means.
All right, I'll only make one comment here, and that is, I think, to go with Clint's comment about core brokenness, right, that this is different from a personality inventory in that it's less interested in what behaviors you can be grouped by and more interested in the state of your soul, the question of what's driving you underneath the surface, and that touches what you do, but it's more than that. I want to just encourage you as you enter into this process, if you're willing to be vulnerable, if you're willing to open yourself to the process, the first and last word should be compassion. Should be compassion. Because if you dig deep and find something that you would rather not find, the truth is that the one who meets you there is far greater than your brokenness, right? If it kicks you in the gut, which every person I've heard who's taken this seriously, who I've talked with, who's taken the Enneagram seriously, has been winded at least once, have compassion. And the same thing goes when you experience that yourself, there's absolutely no way that you can't have compassion for others. If you experience that feeling of, oh, that's me, everybody else pales in comparison. So, that being said, let's do that. Let's get on the fun task. Let's get on the fun train. So what you have is you have your worksheet in front of you. Flip it over. You see that there are two groups labeled Group 1 and Group 2. What we're going to ask you to do is we're going to ask you to read through those paragraphs in those groups. So in Group 1, read through A, B, and C. Number those with what paragraph seems most like you, a little less like you, and least like you. Number the paragraph that seems most like you with 3, and the one that seems least like you with number 1. So do Group 1, and then do Group 2. We'll give you about 3 to 4 minutes to do that. All right. We're gonna keep moving here. So, I want you to turn your paper over and put it down. That's behind you. What we're doing tonight is really, it's a remedial effort, to be honest with you. The best way, as Pastor Clint mentioned, really to explore your number, the best way is to read a book. And we can't do that in an hour. So what you've just done is going to be 1 point on the graph. Now we're going to make another point on the graph. What we're going to have you do is you're going to see that there are 9 pieces of paper spread out across the room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What we're going to invite you to do is we're going to invite you to go and mingle by all 9 of those pieces of paper. And what you're going to find is there's going to be 20 statements, short declarative statements on each paper. And what we're asking you to do is to read through those statements and to just go on a mental checklist asking the question, does this statement describe me? Does this resonate with me? And as you go through, you're gonna have some statements that you think, oh yeah, absolutely, that one, and then you go 5 or 6, that's not me. Yeah, that makes sense, right? See if you're going to come to a couple papers, and maybe even one, where you just start ticking off boxes. Oh, yep, that one. Yeah, ooh, yeah, that one, that one, that one, that one. What you want to find is which paper has the most statements that really resonate with you, that you feel like there's an internal congruence, if you let me use that language. When you find that paper, whatever one you think makes most sense amongst your mingling across the 9, there's going to be a letter at the top of it. Put that letter in your mind, come back and write it on your piece of paper, and that's where we're going to pick up next. A few notes here before we start this section of the night. So first of all, I did already have someone come and say, what if I read all 9 and none of them sound like me? You're totally normal. That's great. And another thing I'm going to say is we've clearly never done this in a group this size. I would be shocked if we had a huge number of you that your numbers are going to match up between these two events, or these two tests, really, quite frankly. We're trying to get you in the ballpark so that as we go through this together in the coming weeks, you can sort of tune in those sections, you know, am I a 1 or a 4 or a 6? When we talk about 1s and 4s and 6s, that's when you can, okay, is this me, if that makes sense. So we're not trying to nail it down, just trying to get in the ballpark, but this is how we're going to do this. So want you to look at the back of your worksheet here again, the quick Enneagram sorting test. I want you to find in group 1 and group 2 where you wrote the number 3, the one that you made the highest connection. I want you to put those 2 letters next to each other on the right. So if I said that A was a 3 and X was a 3, my letter combination would be AX. Does that make sense? So find your 3. You have 2 3s, one in group 1, one in group B, and write those 2 numbers next to each other. Letters. You want the letters. You found your letter with the number 3. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
What if we're all 10s?
If you're all 10s, then we would have discovered a new typology, and that would be great. We will write a book, though no one might read it. All right, so everyone, we're there? We're good? Okay, great. So now that you have that, I want you to find the number that you most identified with on the posters, right? When you went around, you looked at the posters, we purposely confiscated the numbers so that you couldn't try to be guessing what you were. So if you were an H, you were a number 1. If you resonate with F, you are a number 2. If you resonate with the B statements, you're a number 3, and so on and so forth. So go ahead and jot down the number there that you most associate with based upon the letter of the statements. All right. So I'd love to see a show of are we all there? Yep. I'd love to see a show of hands of people who say both activities generate the same number. You have the same number across both of them. Okay? Yeah, that's an interesting finding. How many would say that you had a couple numbers, maybe you saw that you had a couple numbers that were sort of dancing around with each other. Both of them seem to be realistic. See a show of hands on that? Couple you think that I could be in the ballpark? Okay. So once again, we're not trying to find your house address here. We're really kind of trying to find your zip code, if that makes sense. And as we go through, we'll narrow that down as we go.
Out of curiosity, if you had more than one poster, was one of them your paragraph number? Some of you had multiple different poster numbers and a different paragraph number. That's what you're telling me. All right. All right. I don't know. I don't know. It probably means you are wonderfully balanced. or really bad at stuff like this. One of the two. So let me just read you a summary. This is in very broad terms a kind of heading for each type. So type 1. A 1 strives for excellence, duty, and moral principles. Type 2 strives for love through self-sacrifice. Type 3 strives for appreciative recognition and success. Type 4, discovering identity and faithful authenticity. Type 5 seeks decisive clarity and thoughtful conclusions. 6 strives for constancy and confident loyalty. 7 strives for imagination and freedom and for independence. 8 strives for passion, intensity, and autonomy. 9 strives for harmony and peacefulness as a response to life. If that may help you in terms of some heading. Now, we will unpack most of this next week, but here's another, just a broad shot. These are the base needs for each type, and this may strike a chord with you. Type 1, the need to be perfect. Type 2, the need to be needed. Type 3, the need to succeed. Type 4, the need to be special or unique. Type 5, the need to understand or perceive. Type 6, the need to be sure and certain, secure. Type 7, the need to avoid pain. Type 8, the need to push against. Type 9, the need to avoid. That may help you in conjunction with some of those other things. We will spend a lot of time on that kind of stuff next week. But again, as Michael said, try to locate you in a neighborhood. Some of that may be helpful. If you have questions, if you want to have some of this conversation, we're both around afterwards. Come and find us. If you're confused right now, it will get better. I think it will get better. I'm not going to promise you. I think it will get better. Listen to Thursday's podcast if you haven't. Listen this Thursday. Come next Sunday. This is very much a journey, and you'll get there.